Good morning. It's March 31st. It's the last day of March. Yes, it is. 30 days have September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, which includes March. Yeah. Remember that in first grade? Whatever grade. A long time ago. Yeah, there's Jimmy. A little sip of my hot coffee. All right, I've been working on some statistics. Let me cut down epidemic. It seems to be. Yeah. There we go. How's that? Yeah. Got to find the right balance between epidemic sound instrumental or royalty free. Keep streaming. Yeah, it's like when you're in the winter time up north, you keep the water drizzling through the pipes so that it doesn't freeze. Moving water does not freeze. Or it freezes at a lower temperature than if the water was standing, right? It's hard for the crystals to form if the water is moving. But if the temperature gets low enough, it'll freeze. Anyway, got something which has been making me crazy. Making me crazy. Yeah. All right. I went to the Social Security Administration to find out what the heck. Anyway, so if you see all recipients, $1,783 average monthly benefit. But in fact, the average retired worker receives $1,920 a month. So I split the monkey in half. And I used the number of $1,800 a month. That's pretty fair, huh? What do you think? So now I went through this, hopefully, very carefully. So, it was determined by Trump's team of regular businessmen serving as auditors, if you will. They're going around, they're basically auditing companies. They don't actually have, I don't think they actually have, meaning Doge, don't think they actually have the legal authority to fire people. Okay? But what they do have the authority to do is once Trump approves whatever their findings are, and if firing is in the queue, then Trump can direct the Doge people to go meet with the appropriate secretary of the Social Security Administration, for example, or the director. So I don't know what the heck they call the head guy at the Social Security Administration. After I go through this, we're going to call him Buffoon, because if Doge determined that 15.1 million people are currently receiving Social Security benefits that are over the age of 120. Okay. Now, unless they beam down from Saturn, we don't have anybody. I don't think we have anybody. And if we do, let's say it's under 10, it's surely not 15 million. Okay? Just for argument's sake. Let's say there are 100,000 people at the age of 100. I don't think that's a true number, but I just rounded up, if you will. So if there's 15.1 million people over the age of 120, I'm saying there's, 100,000 people actually living over the age of 100. That's way overstated, but I'm just getting rid of that 0.1. And I went to the Social Security thing, and I went to the Social Security online, thing. And if you take this number, take that number, the average monthly, $1,800 a month is the current 2024 average Social Security benefit per month. Now, if you take $1,800 a month and multiply it by 12, what do you get? $21,000 a year. Let's just check that math. All right, here's my trusty calculator. We're going to clear it. 1,800 times 12. 21,600. All right? 21,600. I rounded down for the sake of making sure we don't overstate this. All right? So let's say there are, less than 100,000 people actually living over the age of 100 years old. Therefore, there's 15 million deceased people over the age of 120 that are currently receiving $21,000 a year in annual benefits. So if you multiply 21,000 times 15 million, that is 3.15 billion a year that is currently being funded by the Social Security Administration for people over the age of 120. So if there's a top floor where there are 50 people working in the Social Security Administration, they're all the top dogs, fire them all. Fire them all. Because they're obviously totally incompetent. How can you pay $315 billion a year? Last year we funded $315 billion last year, currently paid to deceased Americans, because we don't have Americans that are over 120 years old. If there are, there's 7. There's surely not 15 million. And if they're over 120, that means we've at least, and we only got like 1,000 that are over 100. I actually up here, let's say there are 100,000 actually living over 100. There aren't 100,000. You're lucky if there are 2,000. Remember, the World War II vets, there's 639 of those people left. They die. They died, $315 billion a year we funded last year, and we're going to fund We're funding oh, we're funding another 1,800 a month. Every month they keep getting it. Someone's getting it. And we know who they are because it's direct deposit into a current bank account. Now, if you take 21,000 a year, okay, back to the calculator. There's our trusty calculator. Times. I'm trying to get around this microphone. Times 20 equals 432,000. So we know for 20 years we've been funding 1,800 a month every month, because for these people to be over 120, I think we can assume we paid them when they were 101 years old, 102 years old, 103 years old, up to now they're 120 years old. So, what does that multiply out to? $432,000. That's quite a number. So we just take those numbers. They're 300. Yeah. Whew. That's 6,300 billion for 20 years worth of that. Well, that's $6.3 trillion have currently that have been paid over the last 20 years to people over 120. So last year, over 119. Year before that, 118. Year before that, 117. Oh boy, big numbers. 6.3 trillion. That's just like, we don't understand trillions. Let's just stick to 315 billion. That's a big enough number. That's per year. Now, now I'm going to make some snafu, scientific wild ass guessing. Scientific wild ass guessing. Well, let's assume if there are 15 million people over the age of 20, surely there's 20 million people that are deceased, by the way, over the years of 100 and less than 120. And we're not counting the 100,000. I'm saying there's 100,000 people that live over 100. I don't think so, but I've got that in the in these numbers up here. Okay. Stop it. I'm doing a reverse pinch here so we can see this without having to go full screen mode. It is essentially full screen mode. You can see it on the left side. So now I'm totally pulling this out of my fanny because I don't know, but if there are 15 million over 120, surely there are 20 million people over 100 and less than 120. That's my assumption, that there are 20 million of them. And if there are 20 million of them, and we're funding them 21,000 a year in current Social Security benefits, that's 420 billion a year paid to that group. So there's 420 billion a year paid to the spouses or the estates of deceased Social Security beneficiaries for surviving benefit recipients over 100 but less than 120. All right? So now we got everybody, so to speak. We got more than everybody, a lot more. So 15 million plus 20 million is 35 million. Okay? But let's just look at the annual. The annual. You got 420 billion for the people that are over 100 and less than 120. And you got 315 billion for all those that are over 120, which are none, but the Social Security is paying it. That's why you fire everybody on the top floor of the Social Security building. How the hell? Yeah, I mean, this is like the oversight of the century award. You know, we build an office building with a roof on it, right? We got to tell you to put the roof on. We got to tell you not to pay beneficiaries that are over 120 years old. And since we know there's only 2,000 people over the age of 100 or 3,000, I used, 100,000. Well, there aren't 100,000 people over 100. I just used it, so hardly anyone could argue with this. So you got 420 billion a year currently being paid to the spouses, the surviving spouses of a Social Security beneficiary, or the estates of deceased Social Security beneficiaries. That equals 735 billion a year being paid to people that are deceased over 100. 735 billion. So 2 years worth. 4 years worth. That's almost 3 trillion. You just multiply the years that Biden was president. 4 times 7 is 28. All right, let's just do 735. Let's just multiply it out. 735 times 4 equals 2.94 trillion during the Biden administration. Yep. Oh, darn it. Touch screen. You gotta make sure you don't use fat fingers with touch screen. So since we're funding over 700 billion a year for people that are dead, almost everybody over 101. What? Maybe there's one person 106. Who knows? 2, 10, 100. I said 100,000. Just so none of you could argue with me too loudly. Anyway. So, assuming that Pam Bondi and her geniuses are going to receive information from Doge saying that there's 15 million people over the age of 120 receiving 315 billion a year currently. The DOJ needs to hire, thousands of agents to file 35 million lawsuits for all those people over the age of 100. Less 1,000 that actually are over 100, or whatever that number really is. Yeah. So say 34 million. You can round down a million. There aren't a million people over the age of 100 in the United States of America. But let's just say 35 million. I said less 1,000 actual souls living over the age of 100. Maybe it's 2,000, 3,000. I use the number of 100,000 just to be doubly safe. So we need to file 35 million lawsuits immediately. And file that against the signatories, because if we got 35 million people receiving Social Security benefits, then that means there are 35 million checking accounts in U.S. domiciled, or in banking institutions around the planet. They don't have to be American bank accounts. They could be, they could be in Panama. They could be in Spain, wherever someone's picking up that money. Either that, or we got a lot of big $400,000 checking accounts, that haven't been touched. I checked with Marilyn, my branch manager extraordinaire, and said, if they're receiving, let's just say, Joe Blow is receiving monthly Social Security deposits in the amount of $1,800 a month for year after year after year, would there be any reason for you to call that customer or call in that customer or challenge, the signatories on the account? If no one has complained about that account in some way or another. In other words, no lost checkbooks, no they're properly changing their address, fill out the thing. But someone's picking up the money. Either that, or there are a lot of $400,000 cash in bank accounts. Like 35 million of them. So the DOJ has to file immediate litigation. I mean, this is just Jimmy. I don't know anything about DOJ. I'm just pretending I'm Pam Bondi. And I read this, and somehow or other she got a hold of this little memorandum of understanding. And there are 35 million spouses, or the estates of spouses, over the age of 100 that are receiving $735 billion. We're worried about deficits, right? We're taking in less money tax-wise. We're spending more than we're taking in. So that's $735 billion a year. We're borrowing from the Chinese, the Japanese, the Germans. They're buying our treasury bills every Thursday at the treasury bill auction. Every Thursday. Every week. On Thursday, there's an auction of our treasury bills. And those three countries are buying a lion's share of our treasury bills. A lion's share, let's say, 90%. So of that 735 billion, 635 billion a year is borrowed money from the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Germans, and a few other assorted countries, pension funds and whatever. So it's bad enough that we're paying that money out, but we're actually having to borrow the money to pay it out to people that are dead. So someone asks me, how could that happen? Well, I can tell you how it can happen. I can tell you how some of it can happen. So this is hypothetical. Jimmy dies. I'm receiving, $1,800 a month of Social Security benefits. So Marilyn is all upset, and funeral arrangements, they carry the body out feet first in the ambulance, and the doctor says, oh yeah, he's dead. Everyone agrees he's dead. They make a filing with the state of Florida. Yeah, he's dead. issue death certificates. So the funeral arrangements are made, and the funeral director goes over to Marilyn and says, Miss Wilson, I'm sorry to ask you this question. How many death certificates would you like? Oh, could you send us 10? So they, when they file the paperwork with the state of Florida, as required by, Florida statutes, the funeral director files very official papers certifying, essentially, with the aid of the hospital, the death of Timmy. Got 10 certificates. So what's Marilyn to do? Oh, she's so upset. She can't. We have a funeral. We have a wake after. They have a funeral, and you got the reception for the funeral, and whatever the I don't know. I can write a book, but I don't know about funerals. I've been to like 2, and certainly not my own. Yeah, yet. Anyway, so the bereaved wife gets on with this, she figures out, where am I going to live? You look at all the affairs and family meetings. So after a couple of months pass by, the whole notion of Jimmy actually getting Social Security checks kind of gets forgotten about, in a sense. The money, Marilyn's check and my check keeps, flowing into the account. We each get 18, actually more than that, but let's just use the numbers we got here. $1,800 a month. So that's $21,000 a year. So between the two, that's $42,000 a year worth of Social Security. It just keeps coming and going, and take the money out, and you pay this, and pay the electric bill, and you just kind of forget about it, because, by the third Wednesday of the month, the Social Security benefits are paid, and between the third week of the month and the fourth week of the month, you pay all your bills and keep the change. Assuming there's no other retirement income. This is keep it simple, stupid. So that just gets forgotten. 3 months goes by, 6 months. It just gets totally forgotten. Okay. So for 20 years now, according to this little piece of this little electronic file I just created, it goes on for 20 years. That's trillions of dollars have just flowed out. It's like a leaky ship, and a big ass hole in the bottom of the ship. The hole is $735 billion a year being funded to people, dead beneficiaries, deceased beneficiaries over the age of 100, over the age of 120. I just combine it. So if you just take all these numbers and divide by 2, it's still 300 or 400 billion a year. Every 3 years it's $1 trillion. Well, it's not. It's it's $2 trillion. Amazing. So since the Social Security Administration is incompetent to the highest order, because they certainly know, they have actuarial tables. Who's signing off on someone that's 121 years old? Do you think that person, I know they just look at big spreadsheets with all these big numbers, but, like an audit test, Deloitte and Touche, someone take a look, and how many could there actually be living over the age of 120 years old? Well, just from, pretty basic logic, I don't think there's anybody over the age of 120, except for the 100,000 I accepted for up here. I don't think there's, and I'm giving, oh boy, that's a tall order. I'm saying there's 100,000 real souls living over the age of 100. I don't believe that, but I just threw it in there just as a spoiler alert. So that way I'm pretty safe with this 35 million figure. So get this. I read somewhere, someplace, and around the time where Trump was saying there's 65 million people currently receiving Social Security benefits. Well, I'm saying here half of them is illegal. 35 of the 65 million, they're dead. My understanding of the Social Security Administration is that taxpayers, surviving spouses are required by law, by penalty of felony, you're required by law to stop the Social Security benefit of the party that died. And then the surviving spouse just gets her, assuming he died, she gets her check, but his check is stopped. And she's required by law to stop it. Well, that doesn't mean that Social Security doesn't look at it, And you think they would, reach, this is part of the executive office of the United States. The executive office, like Trump, is the chief executive officer of the United States of America. He's also, the commander-in-chief. So, he's also in charge of the DOJ. Now, you have an attorney general, but she reports to him. And you'd think somebody would go around to all the states. You already have laws. You already have, the Social Security Administration's got all kinds of laws, right? They don't make this stuff up. They're controlled by actions of Congress. And they ought to tell every state, every bank, if there's a change, we want death certificates from everybody that's receiving Social Security benefits. We want death certificates, copies of death certificates from everybody. The state can push out, these spreadsheets. Social Security number, name, birthday, you're dead. You're deceased. And just go back to Social Security records. I mean, this is not rocket science, everybody that reconciles their checkbook does this every month or every 3 months, or at least every year. But see, the bank knows exactly who the surviving beneficiaries are, or the estates. One of the requirements, you would think, of if you agree to be the executor of an estate, then you're essentially filling in for, like a surviving spouse in a sense. Well, you don't have a surviving spouse because they're both dead. They both died. They died in the same car accident. One died this year and the other dies 5 years later or 5 years earlier, or whatever. Eventually we come to the end of our life cycle, apparently. We don't live forever, not yet. But there's hundreds of billions, 700 billion a year being paid in current benefits to dead people. And I extrapolated and guessed and everything from everybody over 100. And I took away 100,000. I'm saying there's 100,000 people over the age of 100. Really, yeah, certifiably alive. I think that number is higher by an order of magnitude. It could be 2 orders of magnitude. 100,000 is 10,000 is 1,000. It could be 2 orders of magnitude. Let's just say, I've given the benefit of the doubt. Even with that benefit of the doubt, we're still funding $700 billion a year to dead people. That has to stop. So the DOJ has to sign an order to the Chief Administrator of the Social Security Administration. The first letter should come from the President of the United States saying, you're fired. Whoever who's in charge of Social Security, you're fired. You're out of here. All the money, oh my God. We're trying to balance the budget in a sense. And you got a $700 billion a year hole in the bottom of the ship that you didn't have the sense of duty, mind, soul to just see that. Looks like an awfully big. We got 35 million people over the age of 100. Really? Is that possible? Actually, there's no actuarial table on. Go to Metropolitan Life. Ask them. How many people do you think that are Social Security beneficiaries are living over the age of 100? They have actuarial tables. I mean, it's all statistical mumbo jumbo, but there sure aren't 35 million of them. There sure aren't 100,000 of them. I'll bet you there are not 10,000 of them. But I'm giving the benefit of the doubt of 100,000 people actually living over the age of 100. Yeah, I don't think so. But anyway, 700 billion a year, out the door. Divided by 12 every month. So let's do that math. 735 divided by 12 equals 61 billion a month. That's a lot of billions. 61 billion a month. We continue. We're funding right now. Oh, it's April 1st. Yep, let's get those checks out. Hurry up. Come on, George, hurry up and get that money out the door before someone notices. I mean, yeah, we're surrounded by assassins. You know who said that? Jimmy Durante. We're surrounded by assassins. Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, Lordy. I thought you'd like that little factoid. Phew, wow. I was typing that out in some gigantic text message. Yeah. On my iPhone while watching something stupid on the television. Stupid as stupid does. 700 billion a year. 60 billion a month. 61 billion a month. Excuse me. A billion here, a billion there. You add it all up, it adds up to real money. That's what they say. Yeah. So that took me, I'm sorry to say, it took me about 40 minutes to swallow that poison pill. So stick that in your whatever. Anyway, so we have some special elections coming up, like in Florida, like tomorrow, I think, Florida, and maybe a couple other states, because certain people resigned from Congress to take roles in the Trump administration, like 3 or 4 people. Well, there's special elections to backfill those spots until the next actual congressional election, which is, in 2 years from last November. So Elon Musk and his band of people are just like, this is just so, they just threw this out. Brett Baer had his report where he was interviewing Elon Musk and his seven other premier business people. Like the guy who came out with Airbnb. That young gentleman was in the back row, all the way on the left side. And you go across the elevator ride bios of each of these people, and they're all wealthy. The Airbnb guy, he's another one of those billionaires. Oh my God, they must have stole that money, right? Huh? I don't think so. Some people start things from scratch, like Tesla started from scratch. SpaceX started from scratch. Elon Musk and the SpaceX people had to go launch one of their rockets to go get these two astronauts that got stranded in the International Space Station. Why they stranded? Because NASA doesn't have the capacity, the brain power, whatever the hell it is. They don't have the budget. So the only way they can get back to the space station is to either bum a ride with SpaceX or bum a ride with the Soviet Union or the Russia. There is no Soviet Union anymore. The Russian cosmos. Yeah, so Boeing produced their device, their rocket, and their capsule thing, which by the time it launched 2 years late, by the way. Boeing was finally able to launch their contribution to the space technology. Month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year, Boeing failed to be able to launch anything up to the space station. Finally, 10 months ago, they launched something. Well, by the time it got to the International Space Station, it created like 5 or 6 or 7 leaks. Well, when it has to be pressurized with an atmosphere containing at least oxygen, since that's what our bodies require, and they had some, little jet things that have helium in it to kind of orient the vehicle properly so that it can attach to the space station. Well, there were leaks in the helium tanks. There were leaks in the atmospheric condition of the space thing. So after about 10 days, it seemed like an awful long time, the NASA geniuses sitting down with the Boeing space geniuses, they all sat around in the conference room for like a week. Like 7 days, 8 days, 9 days. And all of a sudden they decided, yeah, we're not going to risk it. You two are going to have to sit tight for a while until we can figure out how to get you back. So your 8-day trip is going to be extended, and we'll let you know how we're going to get you home. It's supposed to be 8 days. Well, 8 days turned out to be 9 months. And there's damage to your body when you're in space over 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Everything in its weightless condition. Your muscles start to atrophy. Your heart expands because You know, it's in this foo-foo world of weightlessness, so it doesn't have to pump that hard to get the blood from your legs back up into your, your thoracic cavity, circulate through your lungs. You know, over millions of years, the heart has shaped itself, the strength of the muscles and the ventricles, and pumping, pumping, pumping. So eventually, a human being, the organs are set to anticipate, the Earth's gravity. So if you go weightless and you're zooming around the planet at 17,000 miles an hour in the space station in a weightless condition, your body is immediately subject to weightlessness, no gravity. I don't know if you remember HAL or the 2001 Space Odyssey. See, now in that show, it was like a big wheel, if you can remember. It was like a really big wheel that was rotating, revolving around an axis. Like a top, you pull the string on the top and it stands straight up, and the peripheral of the top spins at a fast enough velocity so that the top stands straight up and down. Well, the whole theory behind that is, if you have a body out in outer space, even before they could get in outer space, I mean, physicists, thought about this 100 years ago, 200 years ago. You put a body in outer space and you rotate it at a velocity. Now, if it's got a real big diameter, it can revolve around its axis at a slower number of revolutions per minute, if you will, than if you have something where the diameter is 6 inches, 5, 6, 7, 8 inches, 10 inches. But if you get to be 1,000 feet in diameter and you start rotating that whole wheel around its axis, assuming it's perfectly round, then you could be standing up inside the rim of that big rotating. Think of it like a bicycle tire. So now since it's rather large in diameter, and you have an apartment, your own private living quarters, in one of these little spots around the perimeter of this big wheel that's revolving around its axis. If that's revolving fast enough, I don't know what the RPM that would be. That would give you, in a sense, some artificial gravity, because if you're standing up, let's say it's the bottom of the curve, so you're standing up, in the bottom of this bicycle tire, if you will, or bicycle wheel with spokes, so you'd be standing straight up and down. Now when it rotates up to here, you're still standing straight up and down, because the they call it the central pedal acceleration. Since you're rotating, there's a formula: multiply, the velocity and the tangent, and there's a formula. That was figured out a long time ago. How fast does that have to be revolving around its axis to simulate the same or similar gravitational pull that we would experience on Earth? So if you stood on a bathroom scale, if you will, in this big wheel, and if you took off, when you took off, you were 160 pounds. You get on that bathroom scale inside this big wheel that's rotating at the angular velocity equivalent to give you the simulated gravitational pull of Earth. In theory, you should still weigh on that bathroom scale inside this big spaceship that looks like a big wheel, like in the 2001 Space Odyssey. You'd still weigh 160 pounds. Yeah. The same theory is if you had a rock on the end of a string, you tie a rock on the end of a string, and you start rotating that, you start twirling that string. The rock comes up, and it is, almost horizontal, because you've got that thing whipping around in a fast, revolving around the center point of your hand where it's holding that string, and you keep giving it that extra energy to keep that rock as it lifts up, in a sense. That's the exact same principle of this big wheel that would be 1,000 feet in diameter, some, whatever number they decide. So my suggestion for Elon Musk and this whole SpaceX venture, to boldly go where no one has gone before, is to, instead of the space station being a bunch of horizontal and vertical pieces that are bolted together with, to make it airtight, is to start building this big wheel, just like in the Space Odyssey. And once all those pieces are created, yes, one by one, Elon Musk blasts it up into weightless condition. You keep screwing together all these pieces. You got the science department. You got the crew quarters compartments. Each person has their own private compartment. You got the engineering department. You got all these people. You have the cryogenic department, so you can freeze dry people while this big wheel of fortune is flying through space on its way to have an orbital position around Mars. And then, one by one or two by two, or whatever, 20 by 20, people can go from this big space bicycle tire, a really big one, and they can plan out, in the meantime they're living, breeding, having babies, have nurseries, have hospital facilities, full capabilities for the manufacture of oxygen from water. You know, I don't know. There needs to be an intermediary thing, other than just all of us are going to build some kind of uh, a living quarters on Mars. The Martian atmosphere is CO2, carbon dioxide gas. We cannot breathe CO2, so the atmosphere is poisonous to Earthlings. So it just seems like there needs to be some intermediary space vehicle. Maybe a moon of Saturn would be a better place to set up shop. Is there a moon of any other planet in our solar system that has oxygen and or nitrogen in their atmosphere? Not necessarily the same ratio, but a similar ratio as to Earth's 80-20 mix. That's actually 20, 79, and a whole bunch of other little gaseous pieces. It's not 80-20 and nothing else. It's 20% oxygen, 79.5% nitrogen, and then the other 0.5% is a whole bunch of other, like CO2 and H2O and whatever, a bunch of other elemental gases. Anyway, in the meantime, the Doge people. Let's circle back to Doge. Let's circle back to this guy right here. Now, why would the lefties, so you have the conservatives and the righties, hard righties are just as obnoxious as hard lefties. But we're really not hearing from, the non-conservatives. We're really hearing from the very lefties because they got the biggest mouths. Or we're not really hearing from, moderate lefties, if you will. Moderate Democrats. It's the lefties have like control of the mouthpiece of, the party that's not Trump. And they hate Trump. Oh my God. Well, so now they don't have to hate Trump, they can hate Elon. Now, why would you not like Elon? He and his band of 100 people, managed by, 8. Let's say there are eight tribes of 10. So the whole bunch of them is like 100, roughly 100 people. They're digging into the books and records of these various agencies. One of them is, they've been digging through Social Security, and they found 15 million people over the age of 120 are currently receiving Social Security benefits. According to the average, according to the Social Security Administration, which I don't know how good that information is, because they're funding 15 million people over the age of 120. So that leaves me to not have much faith in anything that the Social Security Administration would say. So you really got to take you got to dismantle that agency brick by brick and find out what the hell's really going on over there. Because they obviously don't know what they're doing, because they are currently funding 15 million people over the age of 120. Now that just defies all common sense. friend of mine, a very successful real estate attorney. Actually, he's an attorney that just happened to do a lot of real estate. So, because of that, we call him a real estate attorney. But he's just a smart attorney. And my mother taught me a long time ago, my mother, can you imagine? Rest her soul. It's that common sense ain't very common. Yeah. Now I know what that means. Common sense. Asa B. Groves told me that. He says, you know, Jimmy, he called me Jimmy. He's the only person that called me Jimmy other than when I was like in third grade. And hey Jimmy, can you come out and play? Really. Jimmy just wasn't James, you know, becomes Jim, and the familiar part of Jim is Jimmy. You know, when you're in second, third, fourth grade. Of course, when my mother was not happy with me, James, pick up your socks and underwear off the floor in your bedroom and put it in the washing machine. When I hear James, I go, uh-oh, what didn't I do now? Yeah. So I hear that James, I go a running. Yeah, they're coming after me. Yeah. Anyway. Common sense. Anyway, so Asa Groves, we're sitting around this big luncheon. And it's Asa Groves. Charlie Wilson, no relation. That was Asa Groves' partner. The two of them designed and engineered all their real estate developments that they did around South Florida. And there was Dickie Ace sitting around the table there. Bill Duncan sitting around the table. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Jimmy was there. That's 5. There was another fellow. I can't remember his name, but he decided to do the Broward County development that Asa had up his sleeve, residential development up in Broward County. So that's 2, 4, 5. That's 6 people. Was there anybody else? I think that's it. So there's 6 people sitting around a big round table in the middle of Size Rivergate restaurant and lounge. And I remember sitting at the Size bar. There had to be a bar in there somewhere. I just don't have a visual. They're right on the water, the Miami River, so surely they had a bar overlooking the Miami River or something. But they had a big dining room. You know, so maybe it's just a big restaurant. Since I can't remember the bar, because I surely would have sat at that bar. Anyway, so it's a nice big restaurant. Size Rivergate. C-Y''S. Cy Mandel, if I remember that right. That was his name. Cy Mandel. He owned Size Rivergate. The Rivergate Plaza, because the name of the building they were on the ground floor of was the Rivergate Plaza. Size in the Rivergate Plaza. You know, you drive up through there, you come down Brickell Avenue, and you make a right turn if you're going from north to south down Brickell Avenue. You go right over the Miami River, and you look for the first right-hand turn you can make. You turn right into the valet thingy of the Size Rivergate, which was also like a office building. There may have been condominiums on top of that. May have been a total mixed-use building. Yeah, maybe it was 15, 20 stories. It wasn't like 80 or 90 stories. It was like 15 or 20 stories. That's a guess. But I'll bet you there were condos, apartments, office buildings, suites, condo office building suites, if you will, and some commercial places like Sia's Rivergate restaurant. It's a really nice place. Anyway, Asa B. Groves was his name. So Asa liked that spot. So he gets a hold of Dickie Ace and says, hey, we're all, him and Charlie Wilson and this guy from Broward County, they decided to have lunch at Si's Rivergate. And they said, hey, Ace, you and Bill Duncan and Jimmy, why don't you come join us for lunch? So that's how they had a party of 3 and invited another 3. So that's what made 6 of us. And we sat around this big table, and I remember I'm circling back to one little piece. And Asa looks across to me. We're not sitting next to each other. There's like maybe Charlie was between us. Charlie Wilson, no relation. And Asa looks over and he says, Jimmy, he says, common sense ain't very common. I forget what we were talking about. He says, but you know what? You got it. I said, well, thank you. I think that's a compliment. What do you think, Dick? He said, oh yeah, that's a compliment. Because common sense ain't very common. But you've got it. And therefore, I would like to offer you, some piece of Dade County, and we're going to build houses all over Dade County. And you can be a partner of mine and Charlie, and we'll build houses. So you're working for Barnett Bank. You turn in your gun and your badge there. I pretty much got this thing financed already, but you can do the final touches on it. And we'll build houses until the end of time. We'll build thousands of them. And you'll have, or at least a 10% ownership in it. I said, we'll argue about it on how much ownership you'll have. We'll argue about that at another time. And he offered the same opportunity for this other guy that was going to handle Broward County. I would, with Asa and Charlie Wilson, we'd be Dade County, and this guy with Charlie Wilson and Asa would be the Broward County piece. He said, between us, we're going to build houses like crazy people, because the time is perfect. This is 1975. Just coming out of this, huge, debacle with all this real estate assets and, some bank closures and all this stuff. We were just emerging out of that bad recessionary time period. And, so I didn't do it. I said, Asa, I had a team meeting with, and I said, I just, it's taken me so long to get back in a bank. Working where, working in a stable situation. They hired me in the real estate department at Barnett Bank. And I since went a year later to Royal Trust Bank, which is where I met Marilyn. So if nothing else, I'm glad I did what I did, because I wouldn't have met Marilyn if I had went with Asa to do what he was doing. I wouldn't have met Marilyn. How terrible would that have been? Yeah. But I did go to Royal Trust, and I did meet her. Lucky me. Phew. So anyway, that's how that was our luncheon at Si's Rivergate. Sometime, let's say, May. So I was at Barnett Bank for May. Let's see, I started there like in May of 75. June, July, August, September, October. So let's say it's October, November. Somewhere right around in season, November. Not Christmas, December yet, it's November. Maybe before Thanksgiving. Yeah. How about we do this? We'll get this all going, so at the beginning of the year, we're going to launch these 2 major partnerships, Charlie will take care of all the documentation. You'll be a limited partner. You, this other guy, you'll be a limited partner of that partnership. Jimmy, you'll be a limited partner in this partnership. And I'll be the general partner. And Charlie will also be a limited partner in both. Yeah. That's how that, anyway, this unnamed person, I can't remember his name, he did it. Carr. Last name is Carr, C-A-R-R. How about that? I remembered his last name. Yeah. And he made, this gentleman by the name of Carr made a fortune. He made, like 20, 30, 50, 100 million bucks. His share of that, woo, big bucks. Yeah. The $1975. He made, 20 million bucks. He was like the largest residential developer in Broward County from zero, with Asa and Charlie and the financing that they procured and the properties that they bought, and they bought these PUDs that had the streets, water, sewer already in there, but the company went belly up before they could build anything. Well, Asa would step in there and he'd build the things. He had an arrangement with Chase Manhattan Bank or somebody. They took back this big tracts of property, streets, water, sewer, all in. No houses. Didn't build models. It's just big vacant tracts of land with streets, water, sewer, swales, curbs, fire hydrants, the whole bit. Not a single house. Nothing went vertical, as they say in the business. No vertical development, just all horizontal under the ground. All the subterranean work was done. It rained like hell, and they had the stormwater, sewer, everything was all done. Yep. So he found major tracts of land in Dade County and major tracts of land in Broward County, western parts of both counties. And we'd handle the Dade County, and this guy Carr would handle Broward County. I didn't do it. I guess it's a good thing I didn't. I wouldn't have met Marilyn. There wouldn't have been a Brandon and a Daniel. Anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And the whole reason of bringing that up, which is, was that he told me, he says, common sense ain't very common. He said, but Jimmy, you got it. That's like, Asa was a tough guy. He's real estate. I'm not going to say a cranky old real estate guy, but he didn't put a lot of icing on his cake. He was a pretty strong guy. He was the number 2 guy in Chase Manhattan Bank, globally. He was a very senior exec. I remember we were sitting around the table. He told us the story and how he got fired. As the number 2 highest paid guy in the Chase Manhattan system. Bam! One day people fly into wherever he was officed, and I think in Dade County. He was down here, in South Florida, and the people from New York City flew in and met with Asa at like 11 o'clock in the morning, 10:30, and so then I remember Dickie Ace saying, well, are we going to meet? Are we going to go over and meet Asa at his office, or are we going to meet at Size? And somehow or other, Dick and Bill Duncan met Asa at his office, and when they entered Asa's office, which is a big office, it was like a 10,000 square foot office, big office, couches everywhere and all that stuff. Asa was standing next to his Dracaena plant, urinating in the plant. He was just standing there, And he's standing there and he's just looking down and he's watering his plant. Oh boy. He obviously had didn't have a good meeting with the senior people at Chase Manhattan. They fired him summarily. And by 11:30 they were gone, on their own lunch meeting. And Asa had his lunch meeting, but he was recently dethroned as whatever his title was, resident in South Florida. He headed up. Now, from what I remember him saying, he was the number 2 paid guy. The only guy that made more money than him was John D. Rockefeller, as I remember. That's a pretty high paid guy. Yeah, it's like $300,000 or $400,000 a year. But back in 1975, that was a lot of money. That's like, like $2 million a year or something. Not a bad salary for your average, brilliant real estate attorney. Anyway, so that was the end of Asa. So he and Charlie decided they were going to do something else. And one of them was he was going to take over this ORE, owned real estate, going to take some major tracts off their hands. But he would take it off their hands without having to write a check. That's even better. Yeah, you'll turn this over to us. You already got the money in, and we'll build houses and sell it to the buying public, and you'll get paid off first, and we get paid off second. And we'll just work our way right around the property. It's already in your portfolio. You don't have to do a thing other than sign some paperwork to put us in the the ownership thing. Yeah. Anyway, so all right. It's 10:20. So it's early in the morning, 10:20 a.m. I got a late start today. I'm sorry. I was doing this and doing it while I was working on this 15 million people over the age of 120, and I got so occupied getting that dusted off. I printed it out on my printer. I just had to reduce it to paper. I have a problem trying to correct mistakes that I see on screen for some reason or other. So anyway, I printed it and crossed out words and moved these 2 paragraphs down below and moved up there. So how do you not? I mean, geez, how do you not, immediately issue orders to stop funding this? And it just popped up Thursday night with Brick Bear's 6 o'clock news. Well, anybody, that's got, an IQ over 75 can do the math I just did there. That's not complicated. I got a calculator right on my trusty iPad. There it is right there. It's a simulation of a calculator. It looks like an HP 12C, doesn't it? But it's an app, and it works on my phone. It fills the whole screen of my iPhone. So you would think it's this thing is a calculator. Well, it's an app, and because it's let's see if I turn this sideways, does it go? Yeah, oh yeah. Then you got a real big app. if you go in the portrait mode, it gets even bigger. This is big enough. Yeah, this is like super big. It's actually bigger than my iPhone. All right. So we're going to see if somehow or other the news media, if anybody's going to zero in and multiply 15 million by the 1,800 hours a month average recipient to see if they come out with the three. Oh my God. Oh, oh. I just, please, someone tell me I made some huge mathematical mistake. 15 million. So we take 1,800 a month times 12, you get 21,000 a year. So if you multiply 15 times 20, yeah, that's what you get. You get 3.15 billion annual payments to, or if you divide, if you divide 315 by 12, it's 61 billion a month. You do that enough times, it adds up to be real money. Where have I heard that before? Okay. Oh, that happy tune. I think I'm just gonna. Ooh, I made a whole batch of linguine, and I have a can of cream of mushroom soup. Of course, it's Campbell's, and I have a jar of Heinz chicken gravy. 2/3, no, about equal parts, chicken gravy, mushroom soup. Blend it up with a hand blender. It's a whisk kind of thing. Warm it up. And then throw the pasta in, warm it up for another minute and a half. About 3 minutes till it's warming up. So you got linguine with mushroom sauce. And I'm mixing, remember, the mushroom soup, which is condensed mushroom soup, with chicken gravy. Add an ounce of water just to loosen up a little bit. I can taste it right now. I think I'm going to have a little early lunch if I don't have all you guys salivating. Go ahead and print this out. It's right there online. You can see it right there in living color. Yeah. In the meantime, we'll let more news prop up. We got all kinds of devastating bad weather, tornadoes, out in the Mississippi and that whole mid-south. It's a whole tornado belt that gets whacked with hundreds of tornadoes a year. Normal weather cycle. It's not global anything. It's just the way it is. Okay. So on that happy note, I wish you have a great day. We're going to give you about 30 seconds of uninterrupted. I got to do that. They tell me I should start with this and I should end with that. So that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to go full screen mode on the month and the day. I got a lunch appointment tomorrow, so I'm going to try to get to you early, see if I can actually do 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Yeah. So Marilyn is either going to trap the car, and I'll Uber to lunch. And let her have the car. No problem. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. I keep forgetting to tell you that this is a simulcast. We are simultaneously broadcasting on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and Twitter, aka X. This entire broadcast is on all 3 social networks. It's live if you started an hour and 26 minutes ago, or you can listen to it now. You can listen to it later today, tonight, tomorrow. I don't know how long they keep it there. You know, it's at least a year. Could be forever, for all I know. I don't know if Facebook actually dumps programming after a period of time. I don't know what the rules are with what do you call it? YouTube Live. I should like search that question. I'll report back to you in the morning. See actually how long that content stays alive in the cyberspace. Is it a year, 2 years? Is it unofficially forever? I've got over 400 episodes of my yickety yakety. I've got like about 2,500 friends between Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. You get all kinds of different people listening at different times of day and night. You can always text me at 56141611100, and a text will privately show up on my screen, and I can you can tell me keep it private, and I can read it and answer a question, or you can just say, you know what, Jimmy, you're full of crap. When you multiply this by that, you don't get that. Please go through my math and tell me that's not 300 billion a year. You know, for just the people that are over 120 years old, which there aren't any. Okay, bye-bye.